You want me to start or you want to start, Courtney?
You can go ahead and start, Miss Susan.
Okay. So we decided since it was, I'm Susan Norwell, education specialist, co-founder of Rett University. My email's down there. We decided, and then Courtney, you introduced yourself.
Hi guys, I'm Courtney Barnum. I am the training coordinator and also a coach for Rett University.
So we decided that since it's IEP season, if you're not in the throes of an IEP or pretty soon you're going to get to an IEP, we thought we would discuss accommodations because I think this is the part of the IEP that people kind of rush through. They just kind of go check, 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 and go. But I think for our kids with Rett syndrome or any kiddo with complex needs, we need to be a little bit more vigilant over what they're putting in accommodations. So accommodations are the supports and services provided to help a student access the general education curriculum and validly, with validity, demonstrate learning. And so I'm going to just give you an example, and we'll come to it in a little while, but I'll give you an example just to kind of set your head here. I write goals, and every goal has given a regulated body access to a device, supported seating, child will. And then if there's another given, like their ABC flipbook or their an adapted book, whatever it is. But those first three are so essential because I just had a kiddo this week that I'm helping a local school with this child with Rett syndrome. I'm actually running her program for the school. So I do all of her lesson plans and all her supports, and I go in and train the staff. And I just had to do updates on her goals. And she was having a particularly bumpy couple of weeks. Not all of the weeks, but there were times where she was literally throwing stuff across the room. You know, everybody thinks hand use would be a great thing for their kiddo, except when they have it and they can't control it, and they're throwing things everywhere, and kicking and not wanting to participate. And so I could not assess any of those goals because she wasn't regulated. That was number one in my way I write goals. That accommodation is built into the goal writing. So I'm only taking data on this student when she's regulated, when she's in a good student, when she's got access to a device. She's actually ready. Oops, there you go, Courtney. She's actually ready to do any kind of work. And that is a real saving grace. All right, you can flip the page. Or I can flip the page. No, you can flip the page. All right. So what would be accommodations for kiddos with complex needs like our kids with Rett syndrome? So in other words, what do they need to be able to access the curriculum? So we kind of look at these areas of the IEP. So we look at communication. What would they need? Academics, their independent functioning skills, if they have any independent functioning skills. But even if they don't, what would be the accommodations that we would put in so they could indicate that they need help or they need service or they need somebody to do something? Social accommodations, and then healthcare. And it's important that people not gloss over this area because I was just in an IEP where the person wrote the goal that the child would write an idea. So she kind of took my idea of my goal and said that the child would produce a 3-word sentence that conveyed an idea, but did not have the accommodation that she would have an ABC flipbook. And so I said, well, how is she going to write? She would, this is real stuff. I mean, I'm not making this up, but I think that when people are not quite sure how to work with our kiddos, they have an idea of what they want to do, but they also need to really delineate how are they going to do it. That has to be a part of the goal, and those accommodations have to be listed so that if you picked up the IEP and you moved it to another school, people wouldn't be scratching their heads saying, how are we going to do this? I always say, if we all got hit by a bus tomorrow because somebody operates an IEP, that's how explicitly I like to have my IEP.
My present levels when I was teaching were usually 2 to 3 to 4 pages long because I was so explicit in what they needed. Because if the kids move on, those same supports need to be in place, and we still need to make sure. And one of the things I want to say for us is complex needs can include, yes, our girls and boys with Rett syndrome, but I've also used that same goal writing and some of these same accommodations for my students with autism, for my students with cerebral palsy, with Down syndrome, because some of these same accommodations are just as beneficial to them. As we say a lot with Rett University, what you do in a class for children with autism doesn't work for our kiddos with Rett syndrome. But what we do with Rett syndrome and what we do at Rett University works for our kids with autism, Down syndrome, and the other disabilities as well.
So it's this idea of what is it, instead of saying, no, they can't do it, what is it that's going to make it possible for the child to do it? And while you're talking about present levels, this is really essential, because I've seen so many goals where they say child will decrease hitting or child will decrease spitting. And you're like, okay, what's the present level? And they're like, well, we don't know. Well, how are you going to know it's decreasing if you don't know the present level? So that's just kind of goal writing 101. And we're going to try and stick to accommodations, because I could go on a rant about goal writing in general, because as I said, it's IEP season, so they're flying across my desk like water, and I'm going, oh man, this is so horrible. Okay, let's flip. So what do they need? So let's think about communication. First of all, they need their device, but do they need just their device? So they're out on the playground. What's going to follow them out on the playground so that they have a way to communicate? I just had this discussion at IEP meeting on Wednesday, where I said, you can't bring a device, they can't see it. You can't bring an iPad because in the sun you can't see it. How about, since you're working on reach, the OT has a goal about reach, how about if you just have a single switch and a yes/no board outside, and our 4-grid communication board, and you could even plan with her before she goes outside what she might want to say to a peer. Would she maybe like to say, can you come and swing with me? Or how about if we sit down and listen to some music on my, iPhone or whatever? What is it that the child would like to say to a peer? You could put that in a single switch, and if you're working on a reach, and for some kids that's not possible, for some kids that is possible, then you've embedded that working on a reach for a real functional reason, and also you've given them a way to communicate across all environments. The other thing is that I'm a big proponent of good seating. I don't know too many kids that can rock and roll standing up or in their chairs like this. And our kids have a lot of this movement. Some don't, but the vast majority of kids I work with do have movement. And when they start wringing their hands, they have movement. And now it makes it really difficult for them to use their eyes. And so supported seating for children who don't have wheelchairs already is another accommodation that needs to be written in. And it is the school's responsibility to provide provide that supported seating. I had a mom, I just worked with her little girl, and I said, do you have a chair that she sits in that's supported? She goes, yeah, I'm letting them use it at school because they don't have one. I went, oh, wait, hold the phone there, Mom. Let's pull that chair back. Let's have an IEP meeting, and let's have the school supply a supported seating for that child. It is their responsibility that she be seated appropriately at school. Wheelchairs different because wheelchairs are fitted to that child and they kind of go everywhere with them. So if a kiddo has a wheelchair, fine. But most of the kids that I deal with, even if they have a wheelchair, they're going to have some kind of an activity chair at school. So they're changing positions. And by the way, if you're in a wheelchair, changing positions should be an accommodation. Should be written into the IEP as to how often they are going to be taken out of that chair, put in a different position. If they have a standard, there should be a schedule for that, because there is nothing worse than not being able to move your body and sitting in one place all day. And then people saying, she's not very alert. Well, I don't know how alert any of us would be in that situation. Is there enough wait time given for the child to be able to answer? Is there modeling on their device? I mean, this is just so essential, because nobody is going to learn to communicate on their device if people aren't modeling. And modeling is an accommodation that will get to the goals. So here's the kind of the caveat. Some people will say in an IEP meeting, wow, we don't want to write that down, because then they might have to provide a one-to-one for the child. And I say, well, how are you going to meet your goal? Look at your goal and you tell me how you're going to meet it with nobody modeling on the device. Usually that's enough to kind of shock them into alertness. Peers. What is it that we're going to do to accommodate their interaction with peers? Are we going to, it's kind of hard in COVID right now. I will say proximity to peers is a little bit, frowned upon. But is there a peer that is particularly interested in the child? Is there a way we can do a dyad in speech? Is there a way that we can teach other kids how to model on the device? I find that once you get other kids, other teens, other adults modeling on somebody's device, they're more likely to use it. So those are just some ideas of accommodations. And then acoustics. Does the child need to be at the front of the classroom? Do they need to be at the back? Do they need, if they have CVI, if they have visual processing issues, do they need to not have a window sitting to the right side of them because they're going to be looking at the light from that window all the time because they can't help it. They've got CVI. They're like attracted to the light. They're like flies. So you really have to think about positioning in the classroom, snugging in the visual field for them, lots of things that can happen. And I'm not saying just in a special ed room, in a gen ed room, there are lots of accommodations that need to be made so that child can be successful in that environment in terms of communication.
Agreed. And I was just going to go back to the peers. We all know that many of our girls and boys are very social beings. So having their peers learning how to model on their device is the thing that I feel many of my girls that I work with have gotten pulled in, and that's how they start using their device even more because their peers are modeling on their device. Now, of course, we're pre-COVID, but definitely once we go back to school and things like that, just something to definitely think about, making sure they have that peer interaction.
Academics. So when we're looking at academics, again, we're going to mention seating. It's pretty hard to track print if your body's moving all over the place. The high-tech AAC, what we really want to get across, and you probably have heard us say this a million gajillion times, it's really not for testing or assessment or find the or get the. I've had kids stop using their devices because somebody put a test on it and they had to do their, whatever those stupid state tests are on the computer, and you're going, oh, why did they stop using their Toby? Because people were asking them questions that they're supposed to look up on their Toby and find the answer. Now, that isn't to say that you can't put some things. Like I put adapted books on the Toby all the time so my kids can read them, and the text highlights, and so we learn about beginning tracking and things of that nature. But around the books are a ton of language. There is a ton around the books is a ton of language, so that kids have a way to always say they need help or to talk about the book and not just have it be a test. It's like we don't take the worksheet and put the worksheet on the device. I don't find that to be helpful. I find what happens is the kids start to get anxious because they're asking to do something specific, and then they start to associate the anxiety with the device. And that's the last thing we want. We want that device for their communication purposes. And not to say I don't push my kids. They all do reading, they all do writing, they all do spelling, they all do making words. But they're having their device. So a little girl on Wednesday, she benchmarked at level B. So she passed level B in reading. And so she had to do a level C book. And the level C book has 2 lines of print instead of 1 line of print. And you could just see her face. I mean, she was very anxious and very worried. And I warned her about it. I said, I know this is going to be really hard for you. And you've got a little anxiety going because this is new. But, I'm going to help you. We're going to get through this together. And the book is on her device. But because she had access to her language, she could get to it. She went, worried, overwhelmed, hate, hate, hate. I'm like, okay, I guess I understand exactly how you feel about this experience. And so let's talk about it. So today when we did that same book, only a little further along, I really slowed things down and I really gave her a lot of support because I didn't want her to feel overwhelmed, anxious, and hate, hate, hate by the end of it. But much better that she told me that than she sat there whining and crying because that's unattractive. All right. Appropriate time to answer, amount of answers required. So many times what isn't written into the IEP in terms of goals is, first of all, I will tell you that I would say 70% of the goals I see, 75% of the goals I see aren't even measurable. There is no way anybody could measure them. So, and that's a whole nother topic, but I have seen some of the worst. I always feel like this is the worst one, and then I get another one and it's like, I can't even believe it. But appropriate time to answer, or amount of answers that we are going to give them choices between, or how are they going to make their choices? All of that is accommodations. People have to learn how to use partner-assisted scan. People have to learn how to set up instruction so that the answers are evident to the child, how because a lot of people think partner assisted scan is just a yes and a no. Do you want this, yes or no? Well, actually, it's scanning 2 to 3 items, depending on the age of the child and what they're going to give you. We might need to, in reading, limit some of the visual clutter. I am finding actually more and more kids, and I don't know if it's because I'm just better at looking for it than I used to be, that do have some kind of visual processing issues. And so we want to limit visual clutter. We want to enlarge the print, put spaces between the words, spaces between the lines to help them be a little bit better, more efficient with their reading. I see it all the time that in the books I make for my beginning readers, if the print is on a page, a black page, yellow background, black letters, and that's it, their tracking, it can be really good. I put that same text on the page with the graphic, and they're a hot mess because they're so distracted by the graphic that it's hard. Yeah.
Sorry to interrupt. I apologize. Evie and I read chapter books, and I mean, I read them to her because they're mostly written word. We've been reading Mary Poppins. If I wanted to put that in an adaptive so she could track it and read it herself, that sounds like I would get a membership to Bookshare, which then you'd have to have a teacher, just anybody can sign, like a teacher can sign. It doesn't have to be a doc. And then you download it it's a PDF, you would download it into VoiceStream. And in VoiceStream, there's a cursor that you can set to go at a pace. And then she could read it. But I mean, I'm not sure she could read Mary Poppins, Candace. You would have to know where her reading level is. And if you want her to read the book, then you would give her one at her reading level. But that's another accommodation for reading, is something like VoiceStream, where you can pop the books into it. And I have a lot of girls that are having a lot of success. We've been using, Courtney and I both been using Readtopia, that has some really nice novels. And because they're already PDFs, I just drop them into VoiceStream. And because it's on the iPad, I can spread it apart, make it any size I need for that time. And I can set the pace of it to where they want to hear it, what their pace of tracking is. But those are kids where I've already worked on tracking another way. You know what I'm saying? The beginning. I don't do that with the partners. I don't do that with my.
Susan, sorry to interrupt. The VoiceStream Reader app is actually on the iPad, everybody. I know we just had a question in the chat. You can also use, it doesn't do exactly the same thing, but Immersive Reader, if you have Microsoft Word, Immersive Reader does also limit the lines. The other thing it does, which I'm actually using.
Does Immersive Reader let you set the pace of it?
No, you have to move it one line at a time. That's the one issue. So I use it when I'm sitting with the children, but having them read it independently if I don't have VoiceStream Reader app with me at the time. The other way I'm using it is I actually have a couple kiddos, young men with autism, who the Immersive Reader is actually really good for them because you can separate the words by syllables. And we're working on them trying to read the whole syllable, like read all the syllables. So that being able to do that is really helpful for them, and I'm actually getting more output from them with that. So just another way to use it.
Yeah, I was a little nervous about VoiceStream at first because I thought the kiddos would feel kind of pressure to keep up with the tracker. But because you can get down to, I think one of the voices, the slowest you can go is like 55 words per minute, which is so slow.
I bought it. I just looked on her iPad. I bought it.
I was gonna say, I thought you had it.
Yeah, so the good thing about it is because you can get it slowed down enough, you can find out what's their optimum speed. And it really helps with the rhythmicity of their eyes, because the rhythm and that motor planning piece, I have so many kids that when they start out, they get to midline, they stop. They just can't cross that midline even visually. And so when we look at reading and when we look at learning to read, that print processing is so, so important. And it just takes a lot of work, but it's worth it. Because I've got kids that are reading really, really well. Dominique, like your daughter, who is reading really, really well. And it's taken a lot of work, but she's reading really well, which is good. And then we have to look at material presented in different ways. Like do we have a board? Speaking of Candace got these great yes no boards that we all share. But do you have a way for the yes no to be presented, or for letters to be presented against a black background, so there's less distractor and there's more, it's easier to visually process? I always say, there's so much of what we do, we have to multi-process things. And I feel when kids are complex, I want to strip away some of that hardness in processing and make it easier, because how much bandwidth do you have? I mean, in Rett syndrome or in CP or in Angelman or whatever, how much bandwidth do you have available to do all this multi-processing? So if I can make the visual a little bit easier, and I can make the environment a little less distracting, then I've already taken 2 weights off of them, 2 straws off the camel's back, so to speak, so that all the rest of it's easier. All right, we better get going because I've been talking too long and we're not even halfway through. Okay, independent functioning. And step in anytime you want to, Courtney. I'm just going really fast, I understand. Self-regulation. I can't speak enough about this. And I think that it really does take a lot of training to teach people how to help their kids learn to self-regulate. I was working with a little one 2 days ago who is an eater. Some people have those kind of kids, they just have to constantly be eating. They're always the skinny ones, that don't gain enough weight and they're eating constantly. And you're like, where is this food going? That kid. Anyway, she has learned to scream, and the minute she screams, people are popping food in her mouth. So what does she learn to do is, well, I scream and I get food. And so this whole idea of how to talk to them and what to give them so that they have a way to replace the screaming with either self-talk or some communication. Kate Ahern calls it a hot list, which I think is as good a name as any. But what I try to determine for all my kids is a hot list. What's the number 1 thing that really gets them worked up? What's the number 2 thing? What's the number 3 thing? And they better be asking you as parents, because if the teacher's not asking you, then they're not really availing themselves of their best resource. But when you start to look at those things and you start to put those out there, you're going to change behavior. I changed the kids' behavior by just going to a hot. Go ahead.
Well, I was just going to say, I have a 22-year-old that I am working with currently, and some of the same behaviors, some screaming when she didn't get what she wanted. And what we have done for her is she has things I can say when I'm annoyed and things I can say when I'm really happy. So we taught her how to say, this sucks, adulting sucks. You're annoying. She tells me that at least once a week when we're working together. But those are appropriate things for a 22-year-old to say. And she is much better now that she has that ability to say those things. And we need to make sure that the hot list that we're giving them and the things that we're giving them are age appropriate for them to say.
Yeah, and the hot list too should always be presented in the same order, because what we would like is to have a soft tech copy of that too, so that we take it with us wherever we go. It's not the screaming ends when we walk outside the door. And I think that the way, if you present it always in the same order, they can anticipate, if I just wait a little while, that thing I need is coming. If we're all over the place, then that creates a lot of anxiety and uncertainty. So I do think that self-regulation piece takes a lot of training, because I don't think that people understand it. And I will tell you, I find schools to be particularly bad at this, because especially if kids are included, they want to keep them quiet in the classroom. And I have seen them typically start to make a fuss and people are popping food in their mouth. And I'm like, what are you doing? You're just reinforcing that. If she's having a problem and starting to scream and yell, and you haven't headed it off at the pass by seeing it coming and start talking her through it, then get her out of the room until she's quiet, and then take her back in. And then if she wants something to eat, she can ask. So that's what we did with this little one. She's just 5. She was like, screaming. And I'm like, I know, man, this is really hard. I can't even believe how long you're having to sit here and wait. But I bet you can get your body quiet, and then we're both going to look right at Mom, and I know she's going to hand us something to eat. And you can see her going, okay, I could do this. She got quiet. She looked at Mom, and I said, Mom, now hit it. Because what she has to learn to do is to look first, scream last. Let's look. Let's say something on our talker. And if she looks to Mom, we can start to stretch that out and say, oh, looks like you need something. Let's go through the hot list versus giving her food right away. But it's kind of a stretch it out, stretch it out, stretch it out. And that's the whole idea of a help button. I think that help button's got to be like on every page if on their dynamic display devices. You have to have an easy way to get there, because it'll head off a lot of problems. That's what I have to say. Social emotional. I do think that I have an EDBD background. Emotional disturbances is what it was called when I was in school, back when they were writing on shovels with coal, and behavior disorders. And one of the things that I really feel about and know in my soul, I know this about our kids with Rett syndrome, and I know this about our kids with autism, and I know this about my kids with CP. I know this about all nonverbal children who cannot make their bodies do what they want it to do. That creates anxiety within themselves. And it's because the first thing we trust is our bodies. As babies, that we can reach for something and we can grab it, or we can push something away that we don't want, or we can say no, that we have this power to kind of help ourselves. And that's what helps us kind of define who we are. And so one of the things that I do talk about is I talk about the breath bandit. When their breath is being held for them, I never say they're holding their breath. I write into IEPs, do not tell them to breathe, do not expect them to be able to control this. Be empathic, not a gun, not a sergeant telling them to stop. And don't refer to it as they're holding their breath, because they're not. If they had a choice in the matter, they wouldn't be doing it. But I say to them, oh my gosh, that breath bandit is like so busy today. I have said on occasion, if I ever meet that breath bandit, I'm batting him with a bat. I'm getting a bat, I'm digging it to him. And I always think to myself, if there was one thing that I could fix with the wave of a magic wand, I think it would be that. Because my kids that have breathing trouble, it is hard to watch, but it must be really hard to experience, because you don't even know when it's coming back. So that self-regulation piece, I think that we have to help them by either movement, help them with our words, with our affective engagement. Oh my gosh, this is so hard. I can't even believe I gave you this book. It is so unbelievably hard. And they're looking at me like, yeah, exactly. And why did you give it to me, by the way? In fact, this little girl said, why? And I said, well, because, you're kind of smart and I want you to move forward. And that's why. And she's like, why? And I thought, oh my gosh, this is so good, because she's just like every other kid that she gets the first why answer. Now she's asking another why and another why and another why. But I do think self-regulation, what is it that works for your kiddo? And this is where we have to be careful, because actually my consult I did in Paris this morning at 2 a.m. Was all about a kiddo who was very hooked on video, and then they replaced it with music, and now is terribly hooked on music. She won't do anything unless music is playing. And so how can we start to fade that? We all know, if your parents have kids with Rett syndrome, that music is like the panacea. And I don't want Tina Walton getting mad at me, because she's a music teacher, but there are times when the music becomes an OCD almost. And then all they want is that, and they don't engage in anything else. Now, the reason I'm concerned about that is I think it separates them from their peers, because it's hard to put them in a gen ed classroom if they've got to have, shake it off running in their ear so that they can stay alert. And so I'm cautious. I'm not saying never music. I'm not. It's like I say never, I would never say never chocolate. I think it should be, the primary food group, but I have learned that it should just be in balance with other things I eat. So I think that's the same thing with music and with videos. It should be in balance. And when you find things like that interfering, school has to be on board with you. If you at home are really trying to limit video and limit music and have it be manageable, I had a family that literally had to put a video from the TV onto an iPad, walk them out to the car, put the video in front of them in the car till they got to the restaurant, sit it in front of the child to eat dinner at a restaurant. To me, that's excessive. To me, that's the video is running your life. And it's not helping that child socialize. It's not helping that child be with their peers. It's not helping them to be a communication partner. it's not really helping them move forward. And so I would be careful that people don't use that kind of accommodation to calm a child down, because then the kiddo starts to learn the only way I can be calm is if I'm listening to music, or the only way I can be calm is if I have a video. But in this area, I do think that on my hot list for kids, I have things like I feel lonely, or somebody said something that hurt my feelings, or this, or I feel left out, or I'd really like to be part of that group. Can you help me? We have to really think about what would any child want at that age, at that moment, in that time, and provide those things as an accommodation so that they have access to social interaction. I don't want my kids to ever be only engaged with people who are paid to be with them. That's my goal from a social perspective. And I have to say that I'm very different than I was when I first started my private practice, because now I have 22-year-olds, and I have 33-year-olds, and I have a 47-year-old, and I have people that are in adult programming. And I look now and I say, oh, that thing we let that kid do when he was 3 and 4 isn't flying over here. Particularly for my kids with autism, they don't change very easily. And then even for our individuals with Rett syndrome, if screaming has gotten their way and now they're in an adult program, and the ratio is way different in adult programming than it is, or adult living than it is at home, all of a sudden we have not equipped them to be able to socialize or live independently from us. And I know many of you are saying, oh, they're never going to live independently from me. Well, talk to me in 20 years. So, and a communication partner. We have been really pushing this at Rett U. We have been doing everything we possibly can to put out things there for people to take to their meetings, for them to, when we're in a meeting, is if you don't have somebody using your device, it would be like sending a deaf kid into a classroom with no interpreter. And that is the essence of a communication partner. But also that communication partner has to bring the curriculum to the child. If everybody's counting, our kid isn't going to get out the blocks and put them in front of them and count them. Somebody has to manage those materials so that they're having the same experiences. And by the way, you can't teach peers to help with this. I have seen peers be absolutely amazing because they have no preconceived notion. Huh? Typically, do not bark at me. I'm on a webinar. Okay, go ahead. We'll see if she listens. Environment, seating, we've talked about, special lighting or acoustics. Sometimes we are not even aware of how much the lighting can be stimulating or overstimulating to a child, how much it can distract them from, hold on just a second. Bill, can you grab the dog? There we go. All right. In some classrooms, they'll put like blue, like gauze over the lights so that the fluorescents aren't so bright. But even lights from a window on the side of a kiddo who's got any visual processing problems, they tend to get attracted to the light and they're not looking at the teacher. So we have to really think about where we're positioning them and why. There are just a plethora, if you're all fans of the Three Amigos, there's a plethora of sensory tools out there for kids. I will say that for our hand wringers and our hand squeezers, that I do think that arm braces and hand braces, I've got some kids that are starting to have really bad skin breakdown and contractures. We have to start looking at some of those things to help with that. But for some kids, like a weighted vest or a weighted blanket, I have a weighted lap pad that smells like lavender, which is very calming. That has been very helpful over the years for a lot of my kids. I really think we have to think about movement opportunities, but not just random movement around the classroom. I see some people just saying, well, they just need to get up and walk. No, they don't need to get up and walk because they're kind of haphazard and they're getting up and walk if they can walk. We have, I have a kiddo who can actually operate a scooter, like sit on a scooter and move her feet. That is hard work. That is organizing work. We have a cart that is not on wheels, but it's got We took the wheels off, and the OT put like a carpet on the bottom, and she pushes it with weights on it along the tile floor, to give her, again, more input into her body. And we have to understand we have kind of two kinds of kids, I think, is kids that go overreactive, that need to be calm, and kids that go underreactive. I typically find my kids in wheelchairs go underreactive, and they need movement opportunities. They need to be moved out of those chairs, even to a different chair, even into a stander, even onto I was in a program in Austin, and they had a recliner. It was really helpful for this girl to just sit in a recliner for a half hour, and she could listen to class and be a part of class, but it was changing her position, and she wasn't fatiguing from sitting in the wheelchair so much. And then we talked about reduced visual and auditory distractions. And again, gen ed classrooms are kind of noisy. I get that. But it may be for some of our kids that they can be in that environment fully engaged for a half hour, and then they might need a noise break. Or maybe they need sound reduction headphones if they'll tolerate them. And so there's some ways, if you put them on the fringe, don't stick them in the middle of the classroom if they're really sensitive to sound, because now they've got, sound in stereo, all or surround sound, and that's not good. And then just kind of trying to think about what they're looking at. What's the visual clutter? I will say that most gen ed classrooms are pretty cluttered visually. And there is a ton of talking going on in those classrooms by the teacher. They're without a lot of visual support. So anyway, all right. Okay, so this is the goal that I talked about at the very beginning. What ends up at the beginning of every goal I write for every child I work with is given a regulated calm body or a calm regulated body, supported seating, position for ease of access to an AAC tool, soft and high-tech communication, and 3 to 4 choices and partner-assisted scan in order to. Okay, what is it we want them to do? I might take I might keep the givens and take the 3 to 4 choices and partner-assisted scan and attach that to what they're actually doing. We'll identify the numbers 1 through 5, given 3 to 4 choices via partner-assisted scan to this percentage. But that ability to get that wording into every goal means that on the day the kid has had a seizure and is looking kind of loopy, they should not be taking any data. If the child's had no sleep that night, and some kids, when they've had no sleep at school, other kids are wired to the hilt, screaming, yelling, and throwing things, that's not a day you take data. I don't care if it is your data day. There's no such thing as a data day. Move it around.
I just had an IEP come across the board that said, we'll get data collect on Tuesday. I said, well, what happens if Tuesday's a bad day? Or what if, you're not going to get any data collection? When I taught, I had a teacher on our staff that was, we have to do data collection on this day. Well, there was one child who literally, it was like he knew that day of the week was a day, and he wasn't doing it, and he was going to lose his mind every week on that day. So she never had data for him because she wouldn't do it to another day. So we need to make sure
for data collection through a week, and
right when they're sensory, they're regulated, and when they have good days, because Lord knows, I always look at my teachers and our staffs and say, we're not perfect all the time. I know there are sensory days for me where I'm just not feeling 100%, and I don't want people taking data on me. So why would we need to give the same respect to our students and care for them?
Yeah, and I think the other thing too, something popped into my brain and just popped out of my brain. What were you talking about? It's only because I have had no sleep.
You've been up a while. I was talking about the fact that we need to make sure our data is sprinkled throughout the week and not just on one specific day.
Yeah. Well, it was a really good thought, and maybe when it comes back to me, I'll email everybody with this thought. I just think that I think that I know exactly what it is now. Oh, I'm so excited. So I find this to be particularly true of my girls with Rett syndrome. I have also found it to be true of my nonverbal kids with autism. If they have a great regulated day and they show you that day that they know the numbers 1 through 5, And they have another great regulated day 2 weeks later, and they show you that they know the numbers 1 to 5. They didn't have a brain cramp in between when they're having a hard day and forget what 1 to 5 were. It's that they really sometimes have trouble organizing their response. And so the idea that there has to be this grill and drill and repetition, I will tell you that in most IEPs, it's like a cookie cutter thing they put into every IEP for a special needs child, is that they need repetition, repetition, and review. And I'm like, take that out, because if you repetition, my girls, they are going to spit at you. They are not going to tolerate it. And not to say that they don't need repetition, but I always talk about, like Karen Erickson says, repetition with variety. So if they're struggling with sequence, I'm not going to have them sequence the same story. I'm going to give them multiple stories where we're working on sequence. If they're struggling with, that's what I like about making words. If they're struggling with learning the sound for the vowels, the vowel A, I'm not going to just keep hammering away at the same words. I'm going to give them these 10 lessons where they're moving letters around and every word has got an A in it somewhere. And they don't even know that they're practicing A over and over again because it's different words every time. And so I think that is definitely an accommodation that people don't think about, but I will bet if you look at your IEPs, you're going to see this idea about repetition in there. And I know that's not exactly something people like. My kids don't like that. I'm not so big on it myself. All right, if you have any questions, please email us. We actually do answer our emails. We try to do it as quickly as possible. And we are really happy you're here. And does anybody have any questions? Does anybody want us to see them? I would like to see them.
Everybody's hiding on us.
And we're always talking to circles with a letter on them. And no faces. But I won't take it personally. But anyway, there's your face. Hello. There you are. Yes, well, cheers.
And everybody, if you need, hi guys, I'm Tina. Hi Lillian.
How are you?
Where's my girl?
Hi, Tina. We didn't get our bite picture.
Our bite.
We do our medal.
Oh, with your medals. I know. Hi Molly, how are you? Hi Cammie. It's so good to see everybody. Cammie, you're in two places. Cammie Chan, you're over there and you're over here. Do you know that? You're meeting twice. You are very, very devoted.
That's so strange.
Okay. Anybody have any questions?
I'm sure there's tutorials on VoiceStream on how to work that program, but I know I downloaded it because I saw in the Rett chat on Facebook where I think Shelly was talking about it. Wait a minute.
It was me.
Alyssa's mom, the one in Alabama. And I thought, I need to get that because I read chapter books to her and those are not always something she could, track. So
what we can do is we can do like a short video tutorial on that. Yeah, it's really easy.
Yeah, because I tried and I was lost. I was totally lost. And then I tried to do it and I got so frustrated because it kept highlighting things that weren't right. And then I couldn't edit it. And I'm like, why can't I edit this?
And there is an immersive reader in our free COVID lessons. There is one on immersive reader, but we'll do one for VoiceStream, not a problem. And also to let everybody know, we do offer, Susan and I are happy to look over IEPs, pick them apart, rewrite new goals, which we do quite well, because 9 times out of 10 they don't have what they need for our and making sure that they have the accommodations that they need. So if you guys have any questions or would like us to look over your IEP, we can also attend IEP meetings. Just email me at courtney@gp2c.org and I will get you set up with either myself or Susan to do so. We will be posting this on our YouTube probably after the weekend. If you guys have any things that you would like us to do for a web chat, we are happy for and open for suggestions. We love hearing from everybody. And what are you guys looking for? There's my girl. Sorry, I have to say hi to my girl, Laura.
Hey, Laura.
Love.
Hi, Laura.
Our picture.
Laura, you're a superstar. You're on the Zoom. She's like, really? I'm not so sure I want to be on the Zoom.
Evie's passed out asleep, so
I'm going to be passed out asleep pretty soon. That's for sure. So anyways, thank you so much. And if you think of any questions, please email us. And we are just really happy to help you out. That's what Rett University is all about family support.
Yes.
The goal when I started Rett U, the goal was to try and get this monkey off parents' backs, that really you shouldn't have to be walking into schools telling them how to teach your kiddo. I mean, to me, I think that's really unfortunate that they should get skilled up. So we reach out to schools a lot. We do a lot of training in schools. And actually COVID has been a kind of a good thing, because instead of having to pack up and go someplace for a day or two and doing a brain dump, I've been remoting into schools like every other week and helping support teams. It saves everybody money. And at the same time, it really helps the staff identify what they need. We work on it. They have a couple weeks to play with it. Then we do another remote. So we have been really working hard to try and make schools better and more understanding of our kiddos, but there's a lot more work to be done. So if you have any ideas of things we can do, just let us know. All right? Okay, great. Thank you, everybody.
Thanks, everybody.
Be safe.
Bye.